Laura Marquez-Garrett, a Harvard Law School graduate, dedicated the first 20 years of their career to big law, where they managed complex litigation matters and developed expertise in electronic evidence and forensic investigation. In January 2022, Laura pivoted from their predominantly defense-oriented practice to join the Social Media Victims Law Center, committing themselves to holding social media companies accountable for harms inflicted upon children and families. Laura and their firm are featured in the new documentary Can't Look Away, which chronicles the social media victim law center's fight for justice on behalf of families whose children have suffered tragic consequences linked to social media use. Hi, Laura. That was such an impressive bio. It took me a little bit to get through it.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, how's it going today?
Good, good. Thank you so much for your time. I want to start with the documentary, which I watched last week and I loved it. I was so impressed by it. It's called Can't Look Away, and it depicts scenes from the January 2024 Senate hearings where CEOs of Meta, Snap, TikTok, Discord, and X testified before the Judiciary Committee regarding social media's impact on youth mental health and safety. Many in the digital wellness community hope this would catalyze change through the passage of the Kids Online Safety Act. So, what happened with KOSA, the Kids Online Safety Act, and why do you believe we still lack meaningful legislation to protect
Yeah.
children's safety and health online?
So that's a big question.
Yeah.
Look, KOSA is an incredible piece of legislation. It is something that I began advocating for in 2023, I want to say, and it was maybe the second iteration, right? And there's since been like a third and a fourth. This is a piece of legislation that that lawmakers have every time it's come out, and critics have said, "Oh, what about this? What about that?" They've gone back. They've met with members of the LGBTQ plus community. They've met with members on both sides of the aisle. They've listened, and they have adjusted this thing. It is what I believe to be an incredibly strong piece of legislation. And frankly, it should have passed. And I think that had it been put up for a vote, it would have had support. I mean, it passed through the Senate. I don't remember the exact numbers. It was some high number versus 3, right? It was an incredibly high number. It is truly a bipartisan piece of legislation when it comes to kids' harms. We can all agree you don't get to harm kids on purpose. It's not okay in any context. It's most definitely not okay when it comes to simply making a profit versus some life-saving, important product that has risks. And as far as the why, I think it's been reported on. So I'll just repeat sort of what's been reported on. But look, there are one or two members of Congress who did not put it up, members of the House. Personal belief is that they prioritize profits over children. They prioritize big tech. They allowed big tech to talk them out of it. And really the sad thing is you're talking like one person that could have put it up and chose not to, despite knowing that this individual's colleagues really wanted it to go to the floor. So it's a travesty. And that year, when you look at how these companies, every month we delay, that's millions. Every year we delay, that's billions. Kids, right? Kids are dying. I hate to say every day, maybe it's every week, maybe it's every month. If it's happening at all, it's too much.
Yeah.
And so unfortunately, that delay will cost lives. It's a shame.
Yeah. And, just to be clear, because you mentioned this is a bipartisan issue, in my experience, this is one of the only issues that is bipartisan. If you're a parent, you see this at home, like firsthand. You don't need anything else to give you evidence. But I believe the vote was 93-3 in the Senate, something like that. Right. And just to be clear, it was not brought, it was supposed to be brought to a vote in the House, I believe in December, and it didn't, for reasons that I think we won't know. But like you said, we can speculate. So
what I know is that Johnson and Scalise did not put it up. That's what I know.
Yeah.
And that's the folks from Louisiana. And that's absolutely right. And look, I mean, as far as it being bipartisan, if you saw Can't Look Away, you'll see the politicians there. And what I loved, one of the things they did in the film is you see them from both sides of the aisle, and you see them saying the same things. And look, the parents that have met with them on both sides, there has been nothing but concern and care, and people get it. Unfortunately, if we have a situation where one person says, no, this is not going to go up for a vote, and that is allowed to fly, then that's what happens. And all of us lose.
Yeah. All right. Well, can we pivot to, I want to talk to you about the 13 plus age rating for social media. And I think parents are always surprised when I tell them that this is solely from the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which was from 1998. So this is before social media was invented. And it strictly prohibits companies from collecting personal information from children. So that's it. Nothing about mental health, nothing about safety. So COPA originally defined a child as anyone under 16, which later was lowered to 13 after negotiations. And so, according to an internal report, Meta has 4 million underage users. Common Sense Media reports nearly 40% of children ages 8 through 12 use social media. COPA 2.0 from 2024, so this was attached to COSA, would have raised the age of internet adulthood to 17. So my question is, after all that, do you believe this change would significantly impact the protection of children's mental health and safety?
You know, yes and no. And actually, let me say no and yes. And one of the things, I mean, we talk about COPPA, which is 1998, right?
Yeah.
And they've got millions of kids under the age of 13 on all these platforms. They've done nothing.
Yeah.
So you have, if you look at their apps will say, oh, we recommend for 13 plus. And they're doing that because of COPPA and they want to make it look like they're complying. But in fact, we have whistleblowers and documents and insiders who will say, well, but they know it and they don't care.
Yeah.
And I think as some of these cases move forward, you'll see even more evidence come out that says, hey, they know it. And not only do they not care, like they're actively working against those protections.
Yeah.
You also have the fact that even now with COPPA at 13 plus, Apple and Google Play stores rate these apps 12 plus. Mm-hmm. Like in what world? So when parents go into Apple and they've got these parental control tools in place that Apple is telling them work, but they don't. Yeah. One of the problems is, well, parents that are like, I don't get it. I had it set for 12 plus. How is my child getting an app that federal law says 13 plus? So, I mean, that's just another example of what big tech is doing. So the no is, I don't have a lot of faith in that particular law because we've had it for kids under 13 for over 20 years, and these companies don't comply. They don't comply. They're not honest about what's going on. They claim, oh, well, we don't know because whatever age a kid puts down. I mean, I've seen accounts with people putting age 98, and the reality is they do know. And what we need is a regulatory framework that holds these companies accountable for their actual knowledge. Their actual knowledge is not somebody says they're 98. Their actual knowledge is, hey, when you are designing your product features, when you are marketing, you're dealing with marketers and you're saying, hey, we just gave this to 1 million kids under 18. Who are those kids, right? Because I guarantee you those kids might say they're 98, but these companies know. And so what we need is we need to get behind the curtain. We need to stop letting these companies gaslight us and say, oh, we don't know, but they do know. Mm-hmm. And we know they know. I mean, it's right there, right? It's in Sarah Wynne Williams' new book. What is it? Careless People. It is in the Facebook documents that the whistleblower came forward with, Frances Haugen. It is all over the place. But these companies are so good at shutting things down because they're controlling what like 90% of our society sees and hears. And so most people don't see these pieces. And so again, I would say that, do I think the age should be raised to 17 or 18? Absolutely. And some of that is science, some of that is experience. But I think that unfortunately with COPPA, I don't know if it wasn't effective at 13 plus, I don't know how effective it would have been at 17 plus.
Yeah. I mean, you said something key there, which is that kids just lie about their age. Like, that's the way they're getting around them. And unless you have the parent control set up properly, which you alluded to this, they don't really work effectively, right?
I'm going to go in a little deeper, in fact. So let me start back at statement 1. Kids lie about their age.
Yeah.
It's not only do kids lie about their age, these platforms push them to it, right? Yes. So up until a couple years ago, if I went to open one of these accounts and it would actually set, and I can't tell you off the top of my head which specific platforms, but it would set the date. So today is April 21. It would say, how old are you? Are you at least 13? And then it would say April 21 minus 13 years. It would be all set up. So all a kid has to do is hit return. And I know in one of the publicly available documents somewhere, you have an employee, I believe, even referring to that and saying like, look, we're saying we have an age gate, but we're telling these kids how old to tell us they are, right? Yeah. You have the fact that even now on most of these platforms, if I go set it up and say I'm 10 and it says, oh, sorry, you have to be at least 13. And then I set it up, it's seamless. I set it up again. Oh, here you go. And these kids are opening 5, 10, 15 accounts. Oh, here you go. But they collect device IDs. So they know when one kid has got 15 accounts. So one is kids lie about age because these platforms in part are saying, hey kid, just tell me you're 21 and I'll sell you the booze.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're wearing a school uniform. I don't care if you look like you're 8. Just tell me you're 21.
Yeah.
So I want to focus on that because I want to say, yes, kids do lie, but these platforms are telling them this is no big deal. Everyone's doing it. We don't care how old you are. Just check the box, right?
Yeah.
And on the parental controls, you know, the thing about parental controls, and I know there's public documents out there that talk about this too, is that they are complicated for many parents to use.
Yeah.
And they're not meant to be easy. They're not readily accessible. They're not particularly effective. They are the bare minimum. And then let's throw in the other piece that, to use a parental tool, your child has to tell you they're using an app.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, these companies should have parental tools. They should have stronger and more effective parental tools. They should make those easy for parents to use. In fact, they should put out easy to use manuals for parents, right? They should make it accessible. They should make sure that when a child's opening an account, the first thing that pops up in case their parent is sitting there is, hey, would you like to talk about parental control tools? Yeah. Instead of a scenario, I mean, God, I've had platforms where I've tried to turn my notifications off and it's taken me 4 or 5 times to even find the buttons. And then somehow there's always more buttons. Yeah. So I feel very strongly about these issues, as you can see, but the parental control tools to some degree are a red herring. Let me add, you have things like Sammy's Law, laws that are trying to make these companies not block third-party parental software apps. Yeah. And what's so crazy about what these companies are doing, in fact, I think I just read something about how Meta recently did an update of some sort meant to interfere with these types of parental control tools that are outside the app. Yeah. What's crazy is that Section 230, the piece of law that they use to say, hey, we can never be liable, they're wrong, but regardless, they've had some success. Section 230D actually includes an obligation section that says, you have to disclose to all new consumers those parental control tools, right? So they are interfering with a parent's ability to use the type of tools that Section 230 says, hey, if you want the benefits, this is your quote obligation. Yeah. So the whole thing, it's a setup basically.
Yeah, it's crazy. And I mean, everything you said, but then I'll add one more thing, which is that kids are super smart and they will work around your controls, even if you have them set up correctly, and they've found ways to download social media apps when that's blocked. So it's just whack-a-mole. That's what I say all the time to the parents, okay. So,
and I want to, see, I told you it'd take more than 30 minutes, but I want to add on the super smart piece, they are, and here too, these companies are setting it up that way. So one example that I saw early on, it was at 2016, I think. You had a scenario in 2016 where kids would have one account, maybe a primary, and then they'd have like 1 or 2 Finstas, a fake Instagram. Yeah. The trick with the Finstas was that if a kid was using their account their parents knew about, they would have to manually log out and log back into their Finsta, which is a risk because a parent walking by might say, hey, what is that really bad stuff that I'm seeing? Like what? Yeah. And so often kids were limited in the risks they would take because they were worried, right, about, hey, my parents might notice. And then in like 2016, they actually created a button that has no utility from a pure communication standpoint, but it's a button up in the corner so that now you can have as many Finstas as you want, and you don't have to manually log out. It's a seamless little switch accounts that parents didn't know about. And so when I've worked with young people who were using Instagram at that time, what I have seen is you will go from a young child who has maybe 2 total accounts to 10.
Yeah.
Right. And so here's something else where it's not even, these kids get it because they're born with technology. They're born with remote controls. They're born with cell phones in terms of in society. Like that's how we function in society now. We've been well and good Trojan horse by this company. They've made everything part of our everyday routine. But again, I guess I would just say is that it's important to keep in mind that it's not just that kids are smart, it's that these companies are smart. And they're designing these things to ensure that kids can get around every type of parental protection out there.
Yeah, I mean, design matters, right? And I talk about design a lot. It's actually my background is I come from design. So I really think
Right.
about user experience and things like
Yeah.
that. And it's interesting that you brought up the toggling between accounts because as a social media marketer, that's actually like a really handy feature, but I didn't even think about it in the context of, kids using it to get around
Yeah.
these controls. That's really interesting.
I'd be
Like,
curious if we went back into their documents, and I don't know this answer off the top of my head. I'd be curious what's the discussion, because if I were to make a prediction, again, I don't know this for a fact,
yeah,
but I'd want to see if people, because I know there are public documents talking about Finstas and how they wanted every kid to know they could open secondary accounts.
yeah,
I would want to know, like, why did they create the toggle? Was it for marketers? Or was it for everyone, including, because on their end, they would presumably have seen the spike up
yeah.
when kids start opening multiple accounts. So what was the reasoning? And I don't
Yeah,
know
I
the
mean, to
answer to
your
that.
point, a regular person does not need multiple accounts.
No,
So that's
that's
where,
one solution, right? One
yeah,
solution would be start verifying emails and
yeah,
only allow one or two accounts. And frankly, some of these apps say they only allow one or two accounts, or they used to. I think Snapchat, maybe TikTok, they just don't enforce their terms.
yeah. Crazy. Okay, well, I'm going to zoom out a little bit with you if I can, because you and I both are old enough to vividly recall the downfall of big tobacco. And I believe even the documentary talks about this a little bit. So, this began with the 1964 Surgeon General's report linking smoking to serious health issues. And it culminated in the 1998 Master Settlement Agreement that required billions in payments and restricted marketing practices. So, what parallels do you see with the current era and big tech?
So I want to start by saying, when we just talked about 1964 and 1998, and I can't see those dates without noting for folks and asking folks to please consider that's 34 years.
Yeah,
That's 34 years of consumers getting cancer who had no idea what they were doing was dangerous.
yeah,
In the context of big tobacco, that was devastating. In the context of 90% of our kids, there's not even a word that is strong enough to express what is going to happen if we allow these companies to do what big tobacco did and to delay over and over, right? So that is, I think, for me, uh, man, 34 years is a long time. Kids are
yeah,
dying. We don't
yeah,
have 34 years. The parallels, I mean, God, there's so many, and it's, they took big tobacco's playbook, but they're more sophisticated, right? I mean, big
hmm,
tobacco didn't control 90% of what 90% of people saw and heard. Big
yeah,
tobacco didn't censor us the way these companies are doing every single day. They didn't have quite that influence and control, and it's wild. And unfortunately, it's, my fear has always been, big tobacco, a big turning point was when there was a smoking gun document showing that they knew. What is truly frightening about this is that this fight started with smoking gun documents, not just one, right? Literally like a truckload. Like Frances Haugen comes forward with these documents that
yeah,
are just insane. And that in the big tobacco era, I can't help but think one or two of those would have done the trick.
yeah,
But these companies control. I mean, they censor what we see, what we hear. I've seen examples of this. A good example is, there was a TikTok hearing. I think it was one of the 2023 ones. It could have been 2024.
hmm,
And the hearing was like 5 or 6 hours, and a lot of really important things came out. And the next day, people I knew who don't follow politics, have no interest in politics, but they do have a TikTok. People I knew were like, "Oh, it's weird because I opened my TikTok today, and all I'm seeing are the same 5 or 6 minutes of this hearing. And by the way, it looks like a complete joke." Right.
hmm,
So you have a situation where a platform that is like, that is censorship. That is, you
yeah,
have a scenario where this platform is now pushing and amplifying the 5 or 6 worst moments from that hearing so that they will get the weight of public opinion against Congress and in
yeah,
their favor.
yeah,
And they're sending it to people who are like, no, I've never sought out politics. I don't pause on politics. I don't get politics. But when it's about TikTok, that's what TikTok's serving me, right? And so I will say that is so much worse than anything big tobacco could do in that regard.
yeah,
As far as the parallels, I mean, good Lord, literally the addictive mechanism, it's dopamine hits
yep,
to the brain. So you've got the same addictive mechanism, only now they're going after 8, 10, 12, 14-year-old children.
yeah,
They're fundamentally changing the way these kids' brains are developing, the way these kids feel about themselves. They are now partnering with like health and safety organizations. And look, I think those organizations mean well. I think they are hoping that they can fix things from the inside.
Mhm.
But that was also a big technique, right? It's so you've got, I know the National PTA, I think, just partnered with Meta, the Girl
Yeah.
Scouts. They're going after schools. The moment states start passing laws to say, hey, schools should not be requiring or pushing social media, Instagram says, well, hey, we got a thing where you can have a special reporter, but you have to have an Instagram account and we'll give you a special badge, right? They are, every time somebody does something to keep them in check, to protect our kids, they jump two steps forward and say, okay, now we're going to do this. And
Yeah.
they're undercutting it in the back end.
Yeah.
Lastly, you have what Big Tobacco did, where it would say, hey, we don't have the gold standard research, the scientific research, so you can't pass laws. You can't, which is also crazy in a scenario where we have a massive amount of self reporting, we have a massive amount of emerging science. We have what we are witnessing with our own eyes, what
Yeah.
parents know is happening. We have their documents acknowledging addiction,
Yeah.
depression, anxiety, self harm, things by design. And yet they're still saying, well, but you don't technically have the gold standard quantitative testing. Side note, we don't have the gold standard quantitative testing because they have been serving cease and desist letters on everyone who's trying to go get that data,
Yeah.
right? It's insane. So it is very much like Big Tobacco, but I think in many ways it's a lot worse.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned the 34-year time span. It also reminded me of cars, which is a metaphor we use a lot because when we got cars, we didn't have lines on the road or seatbelts. I think
Right,
it was the same, similar. I think it was 27 years or something like that. But
right.
the biggest difference is tech is moving so much faster. I mean,
Yep,
think about tech 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's nothing like it looks now, which
right.
makes it, even more urgent that we act faster, right? Now we've got AI coming on the heels of, we haven't
Oh,
even locked down social media, and now we've got AI coming. So it's almost more important to move faster in this situation. We don't have 34 years, to your point.
and And
Yeah.
honestly, I mean, part of that is, cars is a great example. When car manufacturers make cars, like we require safety testing on the back end. We have a set of standards. We require safety testing. Now, I get that when the internet came out, we didn't have that in place, but it's important to remember these products are not the internet, right?
No.
Social media is not the internet.
Mm-mm.
COSA is not about the internet. None of these state and federal laws that are seeking to protect children and that are focused on design are about the internet. The
Yeah.
internet is where we get resources. The internet is where we get connectivity. I left for college right when the internet became a thing, and that is where we found resources and community and chat rooms. But the internet was a passive; it was a neutral intermediary where we genuinely had control and could go find what we were looking for.
Yeah.
They like to conflate those things because they're hiding behind the internet, when in reality, they are not the internet,
No.
and they never have been. What
Mm.
they are doing is active. It is their speech. It is their designs. They are pushing us. They are, again, there are public documents out there, and so what I really think we need to start looking at is, why aren't we regulating not the internet, these products, the products that interact and that do certain things that are taking user control. Why are we not regulating these on the back end like we do cars, pharmaceuticals? I can't think of a time in history when we've had a situation like this where we know people are getting hurt. We spend 30 years like testing, and it's been just, oh, oops, nothing. That was totally random. It doesn't
Yeah.
happen, right? Something is happening. We all know something is happening. They know. Um, we are not going to protect our kids by taking pot shots here and there when a car explodes. We are not going to protect our kids by letting car companies manufacture and distribute millions of vehicles that are inherently dangerous, and then forcing consumers who are injured, if not dead, to try and prove not only this is the part that did it, but it was nothing else, right? We have let them turn the tables, and they've made it virtually impossible for people to protect themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I'll add one more point to this. This is adult technology. And I know this because I'm in the tech industry, and it is absolutely not made for kids with developing minds. I mean, as grown-ups, we have a hard enough time putting this stuff down. We know about the dopamine elevation and the potential for addiction. And this is the only item out there that I can think of that is not regulated, that is potentially an adult item. So I'm thinking about gambling, I'm thinking about alcohol, we talked about cigarettes, right? All these other things that are considered adult things are regulated. So this is, to me, the only one I can think of that's left like that. So
It is. I mean, it's funny because you said made for kids. What's so crazy is it's not safe for kids.
right.
When I say how nefarious what these companies are doing, the problem is they are making them for kids. And one of the things I try to explain to adults, to parents, to teachers when we talk, and I use, I use examples, I use testing, I use real stories, and I use the publicly available documents, Facebook documents. And one of the things that is so crazy, if you look at like the public Facebook documents that talk about design, not only are they making it for kids, but that's part of why it's so harmful to kids, because what they're doing, there's one document in particular that shows brain scans and like the frontal lobe and talks about vulnerability and how children are more vulnerable.
Yeah.
They then say, they call it opportunities. The opportunities, they'll say things like, let's put lower quality content in their feed.
Yeah.
Let's do this, let's do that, right? They are designing, they know these products are dangerous to kids. They don't let their own kids use them, but they're then designing them to target children,
Yeah.
which makes them more harmful to kids, more sticky, if you will, to children. And then they're sticking cartoons and stuff and 12 plus ratings, and they're convincing people they're safe. It's bad. I mean, I don't know what that line between civil and criminal liability is, but I also struggle to understand, like, if a car company was out there putting exploding cars onto the market and people were dying, and the regulators came and said, hey, stop doing that. And they said, well, make me.
Yeah.
Like, at some point, do we look at this and say, no, like, you're actually killing people, though.
Yeah.
And you know it. And we've asked you to stop, and you know it, and you need to stop. Like, at what point do we say, like, hey, if you don't stop hurting people on purpose, like you can't do that? I don't know. I don't know the answer.
And I should be clear, what I meant to say was it's not made for kids' health or safety in mind, right? To your
Right.
point, they are
Right.
absolutely designing them to grab
Yes.
attention and
Yeah.
frankly addict the kids. I mean, we know this from the TikTok lawsuit. You mentioned, you alluded to a couple of big ones that came out as part of those redacted TikTok
Oh, yeah.
documents. Remember
Oh,
that?
the younger, the better. Get them
Yeah.
while they're young. US kids are the best because they have a lot of time.
Yep.
But we
And they
know
knew
that compulsive use is baked in, and compulsive use can result in anxiety, depression, the
yeah.
inability to make eye contact.
Yeah. There was even like a figure of how long it takes to addict a kid. I think it was
260 videos.
There you
260
go.
videos, which
Yeah.
equates to roughly 35 minutes at 8 seconds per video.
Very good. That's why you're the lawyer, not me. But yeah, so absolutely, they are designing the addictive
Yeah.
features to go after the kids. But just to clarify, I mean, they're not made with their health
Yes.
in mind. That's what I
Yes,
meant.
100%. And I caught that. And sorry, it's been, because I guess the emphasis, the piece that I would then pull out and emphasize is, but that's what makes them so deceptive, right? It's the fact that they're telling us they're made for kids, but you're right. I mean, they're not safe for children. They're nowhere near safe for kids. But part of the gaslighting is telling us they are, which is part of why adults, and I can tell you in our own work, we work with so many families, you can see patterns in the products that are being used, and you can kind of tie it to the marketing. For example, adults typically trust Facebook because their experience is harmless. It's not dangerous. Yeah. And so a lot of times you will see younger kids, you will see parents who are like, oh, no, I don't know enough about these other apps, but I know Facebook. This is just to hang out with friends and family. You'll see younger kids getting access to Facebook. TikTok, of course, because they sell it as like, hey, this is just a funny dance app. You see little kids in it. YouTube is the biggest. Like, YouTube is huge when it comes to addiction. It is like the gateway drug of these apps.
Yeah.
And people will allow, for good reason, like 2-4-year-old children, because they even have YouTube Kids.
Yeah.
Right? They're not telling parents, hey, this YouTube Kids thing, it comes preloaded on televisions. I've had to delete it off of smart TVs. It looks like a kid's streaming app. That is what parents are being sold. And they don't realize, because Google is not telling them, hey, by the way, these short form videos are doing a real number on your child's brain. They don't want parents to know that. When
I do the parent eds, I actually explicitly have to tell them YouTube is social media. There's something where YouTube has flown under the radar, but to your point, like, it is attached to the like radicalization, because of the
Google's
way
done that on purpose.
No, I know.
Google's done it on purpose, right? They've been brilliant about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm constantly reminding, and you're absolutely right. kids from very, very young age are on it. And then I also have parents say, well, my kid's not on TikTok. They just do YouTube. And I'm like, well, if you're giving them YouTube Shorts is TikTok. Like it's doing the same thing to their brain.
Yeah.
It's often the same content.
And
So
I was going to say they cross over. So the stuff
yeah,
you see on YouTube, TikTok, Discord, I see the same imagery. We see it on Instagram versus TikTok. In fact, a lot of young people will report, and I think it's right, that these apps will sort of work in concert where if one app starts targeting you with something harmful, these kids will jump onto other apps and be like, wow, how did it know?
yeah,
How did Instagram know that TikTok was hitting me with this?
yeah.
They start to sort of work together.
Yeah. And I just want to touch on one more thing that you said, which is that the adults are letting their kids maybe use the apps that they trust because they maybe use Instagram and are comfortable with it. What I think they don't understand, and I've learned this from several sources, but firsthand from Gen Z activists that I work with that have told me about this, which is if you look at an adult's Instagram feed, the For You page, it's not going to have harmful content in it.
Right.
Kids open up their For You page and it's the worst that you can think of. And they haven't even sought out anything negative, whether it's, yeah. So I think that's
1000%.
something parents don't get.
1000%. And when I do talk with parents, that's the data piece that I pull, right? So
Yeah.
examples are like we ran one where I took an account that I had opened years ago but never used. I looked at this Snapchat Discover feature, which is the stuff they curate. It's the stuff they're getting paid for directly.
Yeah.
And I open it up and I've got World's Cutest Baby and Kitchen Hacks. We have an account we opened for a 14-year-old boy, and we open it up and it is one of the most misogynistic, violent things I've
Yep.
seen. And
Yep.
that was a brand new account. TikTok, same thing. I had a TikTok at one point. I don't anymore. I never got the stuff I saw on young people's accounts.
Yeah.
In fact, I opened one just 2 weeks ago after watching Can't Look Away and seeing that test that he ran. And I would tell people,
Yeah.
like, try that test, open a brand new account with no link to any other account, and scroll through. And I did one the other day, and in under 10 minutes, I'm in a suicide rabbit hole.
Yeah.
It's absolutely terrible. And I identified as a 16-year-old in that one,
Yeah.
right? That is right. And I have met with hundreds of young people and hundreds of parents. And I have seen young people look at their parents, like even Facebook, and say, whoa, what is this? Where are the sex ads?
Yeah. Yeah.
The
You can't find them.
ads,
You can't find them
right?
as an adult. Yeah.
No,
It's crazy. Actually,
no.
let me ask you about that because that was something I did want to touch on. I thought it was a really powerful part of the documentary. So let's talk about the TikTok algorithm, which is what you're referring to, that whistleblower. So that TikTok algorithm is particularly notorious for addicting children. We covered that a little bit already. They know this. It was alleged in a lawsuit filed by 14 states attorney general just last year, recently, October 2024. So the whistleblower that you were talking about, that was in the Can't Look Away doc, he transformed his feed into disturbingly dark content in just 15 minutes. So I know we covered this topic a little bit, but how can you tell parents, like, how do social contagion and echo chambers
Mm.
operate on an app like TikTok and other platforms
Yes.
to harm
And
kids?
and honestly, I mean, it's worse than just so. I mean, with social contagion in general, you want, like, if you have in the past when these were uncommon, when children dying by suicide was uncommon,
Yeah,
which it's not anymore. In the past, if a child died by suicide, you didn't want to talk about it. Like, you wanted to make sure children were supported and had resources, but you don't want to talk about the details of it, right? You don't want to have a video of it going around because you may have a scenario where another child is like,
yeah,
oh, okay. So you have that sort of contagion element. And that is, yes, part of the issue, but it's so much more than that.
yeah,
And I will tell you, look, as an adult in my 40s with the most incredible job in the history of the universe, and these incredible children, an incredible home, and healthy, strong relationships, and no history of depression, I can tell you that when I started seeing young people's TikToks on the other side,
hmm,
when I started watching those videos and watching them for any length of time, I had to go get help because the interface, first of all, so on Instagram, you will have an interface that is shoving like 20 images down a kid's brain at any given moment. On TikTok, it is a rapid succession situation. And it is dark and difficult thing. And I think the whistleblower mentioned that in the documentary.
yeah,
Even as an adult, when you're exposed to it,
Yeah.
It causes harm. And it's not just seeing a sad video. It's not just a single video. It is the interface. It is the way the product is set up, the pieces that
Hmm.
addict you and are keeping you locked in, are also then just bombarding your brain with this terrible imagery. I mean, things like never in my life did I think that suicide was a sort of a viable option. And here I am in my 40s, all of a sudden being like, oh, I get why people, and it's like, whoa, where does this come from?
Yeah,
It
it's
comes from
crazy.
being exposed to this in this rapid fire format with no
Hmm.
breaks, with no even sort of opportunity to break over and over and over. I currently, if I am doing investigation in a matter that involves a feed like that, whether it's TikTok or Instagram, usually those are the two worst offenders. Then I will limit myself to no more than 30 minutes and no more than 2, maybe 3 days a week.
Wow.
And these kids, because they've been hooked, these kids are on these apps for let's say 1 to 2 hours minimum every night, and they're being exposed to it. And I'll add another layer to that. Mason, whose story was in the documentary,
Hmm.
and I know that Jenny mentioned it, but I don't think we saw it in the film. Like, I have the videos where you can see the search terms that he ran for,
Yeah.
like, aspirational quotes.
Yes.
And to those videos, he'd gone through a breakup. The app knew he'd been through a breakup. He was heartbroken. Aspirational quotes. There's two of them I've gotten, and one of them, it's actually a person weeping in the background. Both of them are basically a teen boy who's had his heart broken.
Yeah.
In both of these, like the examples I use most often, where you can see it is a young person searching for something like aspirational quotes and getting, well, all good things must end,
Yeah.
right? And so you are getting the opposite. I mean, we talk about we talk about censorship and you want to talk about control. Like, in what world with any product, if you go to the store and they say, hey, you asked for this, we'll give you that, and they give you the opposite, and then they're like, well, what? It's not our fault. I
Yeah.
mean, we just gave you what you wanted. You thought you wanted this, right? And it's suicide content, and
Yeah.
it's self harm. And I see this with kids. It's drugs on Snapchat. It's I meet kids all the time who are like, I was 12. I'd never heard of marijuana.
Yeah.
And it was Snapchat. And Snapchat was sending it to me here and there, and quick ads. And these apps are programming, and they know it. They
Yeah.
are programming to hook our kids. They don't care as much about us, because they're trying to, in their own words, get them young. The younger,
Yeah.
the better. And so really, TikTok being one of the worst offenders, but I've seen it on Instagram as well.
Yeah.
You see it on Facebook a bit, Snapchat to a somewhat lesser degree, except when it comes to drugs. And then, the dealers are being pushed out by quick ad. Um, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening.
I
Yeah.
may have a lot to say about this as well, but I'll keep it short, which is, and I'm sure you saw last week there was another whistleblower that testified. This was Meta this time.
Sarah Wynne
And
Williams.
I think the biggest takeaway from that one was where she revealed that they were exploiting kids' emotions. I already knew they were doing this, right? But
Yeah.
they're exploiting kids' emotions in order to know what ads to send them. So, for example, if a girl was searching, she was having maybe not the best view of her body. Maybe she was searching for weight loss or, some beauty tips or whatever. They would know to feed her an ad for makeup or skincare or fill in the blank, right? Within a
Yep.
certain amount of time. So that's just the latest one. And that doesn't
Yep.
even talk about any tests or anything with
No,
the
and I'm
evidence is
looking
overwhelming.
around because I
Yeah.
usually keep her book here for that very reason. It's chapter
Yeah.
44.
Oh, thank you.
Careless people. Look, everyone buy the book. Trust me, I bought 6 copies so far. I'll probably buy another 6 before the week's over. Really, every parent, every teacher, every person who cares about children needs to buy Careless People. There's a lot of stuff in there that's important, but for me, it's chapter 44. It's 7 pages long. That is the chapter. It's really like the only piece that talks about kids' harms. And look, I strongly suspect her and other whistleblowers like her probably know a lot more. But
Yeah.
when you read her book, every allegation she makes, she supports with names, dates, like locations, quotes, memos.
Yeah.
She has to be very careful to make sure she can prove everything to the letter.
Sure.
I suspect she knows a lot more about it. But that chapter 44 is the one that addresses exactly what you just said,
Yeah.
which we already knew was true from some of these publicly available documents. But it lays it out, and everyone needs to read chapter 44. Everyone needs to buy a copy of that book. That is exactly what they were doing, right? You have these They are able to, one, they know who the 13 to 17-year-old girls are without reference to self-identified age. And two, they have entire systems set up to determine when you are happy, when you are sad, when you are anxious, when you are depressed.
Mm-hmm.
Just one example. The example she gives is, right, if you take down a selfie. Now, that's just one of multiple
Yeah.
signals they use. But essentially, what they were doing and potentially are still doing, I don't know for a fact, was going to advertisers and saying, hey, when the 13 to 17-year-old girls are at their lowest, when they've posted a selfie, they didn't get enough likes, they took it down, for example, we'll
Yeah.
hit them with your makeup ad.
Yeah.
We'll hit them with your diet ad. They didn't even have these young women don't even have to look for diet or
Right.
exercise.
It's fed to them.
It's fed to them.
Yeah.
I mean, it is manipulation. It is exploitation. And the fact that a company, Meta may now say, well, that's taken out of context. The fact that that was ever even a discussion warrants a DOJ investigation, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That's abuse.
And
That's
I'm gonna add
abuse.
one more thing because what maybe being fed a makeup or skincare ad is maybe pretty benign, but once you engage with content like that, it's going to give you more and more of that type of content. It tends to get less and less quality as you go down that rabbit hole. So maybe
Yeah.
they were looking for skincare, makeup, and then they end up with cutting at the very end,
Right.
or
Right.
anemia, not anemia, anorexia, pro
Right.
anorexia content at the very end, right? So
A
it's
hundred, 100%.
it'll
And
grab you even further than that.
but
So it
look,
starts with the ads, but it'll pull you in.
yes, yes, but also I'll tell you. I mean, look, a couple months ago, I was talking to a friend whose daughter was 12 at the time, and they had realized that she was getting onto her school device, a Google Chromebook, and
Yeah,
accessing YouTube, and it had been happening for a couple weeks. And so first off, I was like, well, is it happening at night? No, of course not. But the 12-year-old, who is a very honest young person, I said, are you getting up at night? Of course I am.
yeah,
And then two, I asked the parents, hey, okay, 2 weeks. Have you noticed any changes? Like knowing what you know now, any changes? And it took a moment. And then the mom said, now that you mention it, she's asking for skin creams. But
mm-hmm.
her skin is perfect and she's
Yep,
never had an issue with skin. And so I was like, okay, that's YouTube. That
yep,
is the very subtle thing that parents aren't realizing. They're going to chalk it up to, oh, I have a teen daughter. I have
no,
they're going through puberty, whatever. But look, that is no, this
I
is Google targeting your child. And so give it 2 more weeks and she won't like her hips or her
yep,
eyes or her ears or her
yeah.
fingers, or that is how this starts.
Yeah. And what you're talking about has a name. And I know this is a marketer. They call them the Sephora tweens. So it's exactly what you're talking about. These
Yes.
young girls that are way too young for like active ingredients, asking their parents to go to Sephora, spend a bunch of money on skincare. And they're often damaging their skin because they don't need active ingredients at their age. There was this whole controversy around this brand called Drunk Elephant surrounding this. So that's first of all. Second of all, I have a 9-year-old. And I've been batting around this term that I'm going to call secondhand algorithm. So even though she's not on
Yes.
anything, she's getting exposed to this stuff from her friends. So she's coming to me asking about skincare and nails and any sexualized, frankly, thing you can, and she's coming to me with it. And so it's crazy. But when she comes to me, I go, oh, your friend was on YouTube, or, fill in the blank, and I can see it. But I don't think, to your point, that many parents understand. I think they just think this is the way kids are now. But no, I mean, they're being influenced. So,
Yes, they
yeah,
are. And I'll also ask things like, if a parent's like, oh, I let them start using things recently, and we talk about what have you noticed, and oftentimes I'll say, okay, hey, any sports they liked up until 6 months ago, and now all of a sudden they don't want to do them. Yes.
yeah,
Right. Any clubs, any friend, and the answer is always yes. And look, my response is often, okay, not every 12-year-old who stops wanting to play soccer has a social media addiction,
yeah,
but virtually every 12-year-old with a social media addiction stops wanting to play soccer.
yeah, yeah,
Right. So my point is, yes, it doesn't mean that just because your child is changing. I'm not saying 99% of the time. I am saying that, look, we represent we've been retained by over 4,000 on behalf of over 4,000 children. We filed over 1,200 complaints. I will tell you that in 99% of them, right? Or it's that addiction, and then they stop wanting to do things. They don't like the way their skin looks. They stop all of these things we've been talking about. That's not to say every teenager who exhibits these symptoms has a social media addiction,
Yeah.
but if it is happening, look closer
Yeah.
and figure out what's going on, because that is what these products do by design.
Yeah. Well, since you brought that up, I actually do want to ask you about some of your cases. So,
Mhm.
just as of January, the Social Media Victims Law Center had over 1,800 open cases. It's probably more now. And
No,
you,
I think it's over, I want to say it's over 1,200, maybe 1,300.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Still a lot.
Yeah.
In about 4,000 families. Is that right?
Over 4,000 families have retained
Okay.
this.
And the cases are heartbreaking. I mean, you've alluded to some of them already. They encompass so many harms, including suicide, which we've talked about already, fentanyl overdose, sextortion, dangerous challenges, self harm. So, can you just, if you had to give me the primary categories of harm that are affecting kids, number one, and then number two, like what preventative measures can parents take?
So, categories of harm, and sorry, I type it so I don't forget to answer one and two.
Yes.
Categories of harm, the number one is it's problematic use, it's addiction. It is thousands of parents who believe for good reason they're doing the right thing. It's my child is 10, 12, 16. They had to take the bus to school. We got them a phone. We put the parental controls on. We did. And it will be that even the best situation, no risk factor, et cetera. I mean, it's once the problematic use sets in, I mean, think about any addiction, right? You have a child who had no issues, who was close with their family, and all of the sudden they're sneaking use. They're getting up in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
They're taking it from the hallway. They're taking it from their parents' bedside. They're getting a device from a friend. They're using their Chromebook from school. Becomes a need for them, and parents become the thing standing between them and what they need.
Yeah.
And that is how it is set up. So I would actually say that the biggest category of harm, it's that addiction.
Mm-hmm.
And then that goes, of course, into, I mean, here's the biggie, right? Sleep deprivation. I
Yeah.
know what it does to me as an adult. As an adult, if I go 2 days and I only get 2 hours of sleep, by that third day, my best friend can call me and I'm in tears for no reason.
Yeah.
That is so much worse for these kids. So
Yeah.
it's the addiction and sleep deprivation. Those are the worst and most pervasive.
Mm-hmm.
Those are pure design based harms,
Yeah.
pure design, not content. And so then you also get, I mean, it's everything. It's anxiety, depression, self-harm, suicidality, accidental death, fentanyl poisoning. I think I mentioned suicide. It is, it is everything. It is body dysmorphia, eating disorders of every type. And again, these are, but addiction is the underlying, I mean, we see that in virtually every instance.
Yeah.
So those are the categories of harms. As far as prevention, look, they're designing right now. I mean, it would be like a world in which they're literally handing cigarettes out to your children in class for free with
Yeah.
a lighter, and then saying to parents, "How are you going to prevent?" Right? And it's like, well, I thought taking the cigarette away would do it, but guess what? It doesn't.
No.
It's also that in the way they're current, that's not to say they couldn't have safer social media. It is possible.
Yeah.
That is just not what these companies are doing. So the problem is, it is, hey, if these products were safer, then we could talk about reasonable use, because these kids wouldn't be sleep deprived because
Yeah.
they'd be able to turn it off at night. These companies know it. I mean, I've heard stories of, they talked about, hey, we could slow the algorithm at night, kids could sleep. We're not going to do that because we want engagement. That's
Yeah.
a pure design issue. They could slow the algorithms for kids. They could do all sorts of things. They
They
could
do that
drop the addictive.
in China, by the way. Have you heard that?
Oh, yeah, of course. They also don't show suicide to kids in China on TikTok.
Yeah.
Or
They
it's the
show them,
TikTok product.
they
Yeah.
show them STEM content.
Right,
Yeah.
100%. They could do all that. And so the problem with prevention now is this: look, never stop trying, and give yourself grace, because one parent versus these billion-dollar corporations, and the scientists, the psychologists, they literally hire psychologists, right? Mental health professionals to figure out how to do this. It is not a fair fight.
No.
And I would say, look, for me, knowing what I know, seeing what I've seen, it is difficult, but until things get fixed, I have a no social media, right? No Oculus, no, no cell phones. I'm guarded around my own phones. I've recently started trying to model that behavior. So I actually ultimately recently closed up my social media accounts with like,
Yep.
I think LinkedIn's the only one that I still use. And I will tell you, it took about 2 weeks to get used to it, but now I can watch movies with my kids and never once reach for that device.
Yeah. Yeah.
The now that it's out, I have no, I got rid of the photos that show. I made it a plain black and white device. So I would say, prevention for me. I mean, I'm not okay with my kids smoking cigarettes either.
Yeah.
And so for me, I don't know how to prevent addiction. And so my kids can't have YouTube. We don't
Yeah.
allow it in the house, etc. It is difficult. Obviously, they don't love it. As they
No.
get older, it will get harder. As they get older, if they sneak access, I will be here for them. They will know they can confide in me when they need my help.
Yep.
But just like cigarettes, I'm never going to encourage it.
Yeah. I mean, if I had to give it one word for the younger parents, I would say delay. Just delay as long as you can. And for the older ones, I'd say boundaries. If you've already given
Yes.
it, you can still put in boundaries. It's
Yep.
okay. They're not going to like it, but
Yep.
it's for their health and safety, and you can do it.
I
Yeah.
think that's right. And in fact, one of the things I'll say on YouTube with older kids is acknowledging, look, if they're already using it and they're already harmfully dependent on it, you're not going to just be able to take it away.
Yeah.
But one of the harmful things on YouTube's are those shorts.
Yeah.
And so something I propose is, hey, challenge your child not to watch any YouTube video under 15 minutes for a month.
Yeah.
And have some reward at the end or whatever will
Sure.
work for your kid. Get them into longer form videos
Yep.
because that will make a difference.
Yeah.
Right. And boundaries. And look, I just started reading this book. It's Melanie Hemp, Kids and Brains and Screens. I'm
Yeah.
only through section 1. And I got to say, like reading section 1, I thought I knew a lot about these issues. I've even tightened up my own screen time limits with
Yeah.
even just like televisions, like reading what it's actually doing to kids' brains. I love this
Yeah.
book because it really breaks it down and it's telling you like, hey, this is actually what it's doing to the kid's brain. And read these things, right? And read them. The beautiful thing about that book I just showed is it's set up so you can read it with your kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the goal here is not to stop them from doing something for the sake of stopping them. It is, in my mind, these products as currently designed are no better than, and frankly, in some ways worse than cigarettes.
No.
I would probably give my child a cigarette. No, I wouldn't probably. I would give my child a cigarette before I would give them social media.
Me too.
No hesitation, right? I mean, at least with cigarettes, at some point, my kids are going to grow up and want to be in a relationship, and there are social reasons they might stop smoking.
Yeah.
But it also, a cigarette's not going to change their sense of who they are. It's not going to make them hate themselves.
Yeah.
And these products are.
Well, Laura, thank you so much. I know I've kept you longer than
No,
I wanted.
okay.
I'm a fighter as well, and it's a real David and Goliath, and often I feel alone. But when I talk to people like you that are doing the work and fighting against these huge companies, it just is so encouraging. And thank you.
Yeah.
For your time.
And this is why we win, right? This is why we win. We win because we have something that we will not stop fighting for. And we need parents and teachers and grandparents and aunts and uncles and everyone. Like, this is all of our business. What they're doing is discrimination at a mass scale against children. And so really, it's important to remember, like, as long as we don't give up, they don't win. And we need everyone to just take a stand.
Yeah. But I do think we're at a tipping point. So I'll end it in an optimistic place. So
yeah, we absolutely are.
Yeah.
We absolutely are.
Well, thank you so much again for your time.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.